Hi, hope everyone's doing well. I've seen a couple of questions in the chat already. So today, we're going to be continuing the beacon mine on survival guides. That's obviously going to be our background stuff. Primarily, what we are going to be talking about is the announcement that Gemini Tay and Impulse SV have already made. I think Scar mentioned it on Discord. Not sure if Grian has posted about it anywhere, but I am going to be running Dungeons & Dragons for GIGGS as a group. Now, unfortunately, it seems like Skizzleman is not going to be able to make it. I think he's just really busy at the end of the month, so it looks like Skizz might not be involved. Potentially in future, who knows? In the meantime, Grian, Impulse, Scar, and Gem are going to be our players. I am going to be DMing first a character creation session, maybe with a bit of like a prologue kind of action so that they can get used to the mechanics of the game, and then a one-shot scenario. On Friday, January 30th, we're going to be running the character creation, like session 0, and then on Sunday, so basically over that weekend, on Sunday, we're going to be doing a one-shot. And so I'm compiling an FAQ because there are a lot of questions that people are asking immediately. Mostly things like, oh, why didn't you ask so-and-so to do this? Why are you playing this version of D&D? Why aren't they playing a different system that's slightly more new player friendly? We will get to all of that. First of all, this is going to be actual D&D. It's not going to be some sort of like Minecraft spin-off version of D&D. I'm not going to bring anything to the game that is inspired by stuff they have done in Minecraft, unless they explicitly ask me to. But it's not going to be, and I want to stress this up front, it's not Hermitcraft D&D. And I want to make that pretty clear because obviously people associate me with the Hermitcraft recap, and they're all on the Hermitcraft server. There are a lot of other people on the Hermitcraft server. I was approached with this idea as a GIGGS project. And so obviously there are people on Hermitcraft who have extensive experience with D&D. Tango, Joe, Cleo, Rendog seems really interested, and even if he hasn't played all that much, he's obviously steeped in like the lore of it through stuff like Magic the Gathering and whatnot. Obviously there are some people who people might wonder, why aren't they involved? I want you to know that for a start, that's not my decision. And secondly, the people who are involved in the GIGGS side of things, none of them have played D&D before, and I think what they want is an even playing field. They want everybody going in with no knowledge of the game so that there's not one player who's heard it all before, has a ton of experience, and they have to feel sort of impatient while the other players keep up, which I don't think any of the other hermits would be, to be fair. I think they're all pretty good at being, helpful to people who are new to something, like if they're introducing like one of the other hermits to like a game that they really love, then they're going to be patient. But I think the attraction for the GIGGS crew was really just, we want to be able to all go in fresh, knowing basically nothing. None of them have played a session of D&D before. I think maybe Grian played like once a decade ago, and doesn't really remember a whole lot about it. And Jem has obviously played Baldur's Gate, but that's not quite the same as playing an actual game of D&D, It's going to be so good. I cannot wait to talk more about it. In the meantime, of course, I do want to play some Minecraft in the background. So we're going to pop into Survival Guide, and we're going to continue the beacon mine. Is everyone excited? Because I sure am. It's so cool. To be honest, like, the thing that I was most excited about was that they needed a DM for D&D. Tango was really busy with Decked Out. I think he probably would have been their first choice, but one of the first people they contacted after that was me. And that's very sweet. And Grian just like slid into my DMs on Discord and said, hey, do you know how to DM a game of D&D? And I was like, do I? What do you need? And he was like, so GIGGS are sort of interested. And I'm like, 1,000 times yes. Like, I will drop everything to run a game of D&D for you guys. We wanted to stream the whole thing, and I said, like, obviously a lot of people do session 0 off camera. I think generally to get people introduced to D&D and make sure that players aren't like intimidated by the process, I think a lot of people do session 0 off camera. This group wants there to be hype around it. They want to stream the whole thing. They want people to get excited. They probably want people to make some fan art. Like, guys, fan artists, come through. I'm so excited for people getting hooked on this as a concept, right? Also, selfishly, because I want to do more of it. than just a one-shot. But we're starting with a one-shot because, you know, it might not be for everybody. For some people, it might not be their cup of tea. They just want to have the experience, get in, get out, and not overcommit. I completely understand. But I would love them to get really attached to these characters, or decide that they fumbled character creation, but they're still interested in the game, and then make another character who they can absolutely fall in love with. If this sparks a movement, it will be massive, and that's another reason I'm excited. Like, if it turns out to be just a one-and-done thing, I've had the experience of a lifetime, because running DM for a group like this is going to be so fun. But if it turns into something bigger, then obviously I will happily cede the DM reins to whoever else wants to take over, but I will also happily DM for them until the cows come home. I absolutely love running games for people. It's one of the things that's been my principal hobby outside of video games, has been tabletop games for the last, like, year and going on year and a half now. And obviously, since 2020, I've been running D&D for, like, a home group, but it's only recently that I've started running a lot more stuff locally for IRL groups. I think one-shots and character creation are usually the spark that gets people interested to play more. So, I'm looking forward to that. You know the dates already? January 30th, February 1st. That's a Friday and a Sunday. We're probably going to be starting around 7 or 8 in the evening UK time. It's going to be streamed to everybody's channels. We're going to be sharing our cameras with each other using Stream Together, which is the Twitch tool that lets you do that. I imagine chat is going to be one big combined thing, but we will also, for the purposes of being, like, locked in, immersed, and not get backseated by people, we will probably not be reading chat. We might break out into, like, individual streams either when we're done, or, like, we can choose to take breaks, like a halfway point break or something like that, so that people can check in with their chat, thank inevitably the hordes of people who will be turning up and gifting subs and getting hype about it. It's going to be weird ignoring a chat that's going to be so excited about what we're doing, but also it's going to be a big chat. And you look at people like, obviously comparing ourselves to the greats here, but Critical Role, they don't read their stream chat whilst they're playing. You know what I mean? When they're live, they have social media managers, they have moderators. The players are focused on the game. And I think that's the way it should be. And it also prevents these guys being first-time players from getting a lot of people backseating the way they're doing things in chat. Because I think your first-time D&D should be a judgment-free zone. It should be completely free of anybody, like, feeling like they can do better. And I think it's going to be better for the players if we handle things that way. And I think chat is still going to have a really good time. Like, it's still going to be a party in chat. And so hopefully everyone will be on their best behavior. For now, it's just going to be a one-shot after character creation. I have some fun stuff planned. Like, I'm genuinely firing on all cylinders, I think, as far as planning this goes. If the players enjoy themselves, we will look at doing a campaign, but we will not guarantee the length of that campaign being something particularly long, because from what I gather, GIGGS wanted to play some other games together, but there's not, like, a ton of video games that they really want to play right now. Which is one of the reasons why D&D appealed to them, because they're like, hey, we can play this for as long or as short as we want to, really. We're going to be playing 2024 D&D 5th edition. Because I'm used to 2014 edition. I'm personally excited about getting more experience with the 2024 5th edition rules. And for the players, because they're all new to it, it was probably going to be easier for them to find and purchase 2024 players' handbooks than it was to play OG 5th edition. Like, we're playing 5.5, or whatever you want to call it. And I have played a little bit of 2024 as a player. I haven't DM'd a game of 2024 yet. So I'm happy to be doing that. I think that's going to be pretty fun. I have a virtual tabletop. We're going to be using Foundry. I have the 2024 Player's Handbook loaded into Foundry, so all of the character creation options from the default Player's Handbook are going to be available to them. If we need to homebrew in a couple of things because players really want to play something that's not in the Player's Handbook, I'm on board, but that might have to be by prior arrangement, because I will need to prep a couple of things like, you know, tokens and abilities and that kind of thing, right? yeah, Foundry is great. I picked it up so that I could run a couple of things for the 8-bit community. I ran Morg Borg through Foundry. I've run a couple of other things through Foundry, and I've been taking my home group through Phandelver and Below, because there's a module of that for Foundry, which is really well crafted, in my opinion. The main thing I'm struggling with in terms of prepping the GIGGS D&D thing is tokens, because a lot of the tokens on Foundry are like top-down sprites, and I really prefer the sort of flat art in a circle kind of tokens, so I'm modifying that slightly, but we will see. So I've seen a lot of people so far on other places where it's been posted online ask why we're playing Dungeons and Dragons and not some other system. Like, I think on the Reddit, somebody was like, can you convince them to play Pathfinder 2nd Edition instead? And I get it. Some people don't like Wizards of the Coast. They've made some pretty shoddy business decisions and social decisions in recent years. But frankly, I think that decision is out of my hands, because they came to me and said, we want you to run D&D for us. So I'm not going to turn back to them and say, actually, no, I want to run Pathfinder, or I want to run Kids on Bikes, or I want to run Shadow Dark, or I want to run something else. I'm seeing this as basically them commissioning me, more or less. They're not paying me to do it. I see it as them inviting me to play D&D with them, to run D&D for them. It's not my position to then try and change the deal, right? Dungeons & Dragons has that iconic cultural status right now, which makes it approachable in a different way. Also, Pathfinder, 100% no. I've never run Pathfinder before, for one thing. I have played Starfinder 2nd Edition, and I found it crunchy. As somebody who is fairly used to playing tabletop RPGs, like, Pathfinder would be way too crunchy as somebody's first introduction to a tabletop game, in my opinion. Even with Foundry helping us out with, like, the maths on some of the dice rolls and stuff. Like, I think I'm actually quite happy that we're able to do it through a virtual tabletop, just because it means we don't have to have everyone memorize all of the rules about where you add proficiency and your attack bonus and that kind of stuff, right? So I think Dungeons & Dragons, just because it's a household name, is right for this group. They know they're getting into something that has this history, this legacy, and is also something that the community gets excited about, because a lot of the community has probably been playing D&D, or has seen an episode of Critical Role, or has played Baldur's Gate, and so they understand what they're getting into with D&D. It's sort of like if you started by saying, like, shall we watch a fantasy movie, just kind of generically, and people are like, oh, I don't know, and they're like, I mean Lord of the Rings, and they're like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. There are probably people who think that there are better fantasy movies out there, but everybody knows and loves Lord of the Rings just for what it is. Like, 5e is very approachable in that sense. And when it comes to the game mechanics side of things, we can ignore enough of the rules as make no sense to the players if it's, like, too much for them, until they have more experience with the system, and then we can start to introduce some of the stuff that maybe feels a little bit more crunchy and customizable, but is going to make it a more personalized experience. That is another thing I want to touch on, by the way. There are, as I've mentioned, going to be people in chat who are going to be quibbling about the rules when I ignore stuff for the sake of rule of cool, or when I ignore stuff for the sake of just simplifying the experience for the players. And you're going to have to bear with me on that, because that's not something I will budge on. If I decide to hand-wave a rule because it makes the experience simpler, or because we have to finish up on time, or something like that, like, don't at me. Because I think it is all part of running a good game, especially when something is streamed. Home games and live-streamed games are different. And we're obviously not in the position where we're going to say, like, let's do this as, like, a big entertainment product. We are really just testing the waters as far as streaming D&D goes, but we are still making it a stream. Everyone still has to be done by a certain time because they have real lives and families and whatnot, so, like, let's be chill in the chat. Even the Dungeon Master's Handbook says, feel free to ignore some of these rules if they don't work for your game. And I'm like, yes. I will not be tracking their food when they're running around in, like, the overworld portions of things. I will not be, like, coming down on people about encumbrance and that kind of thing, right? Like, we're just there to have fun. I was introduced to D&D by the Adventure Zone. Rule of cool is the most important rule. Exactly. I was also introduced to D&D by the Adventure Zone. The tone of our game is going to be a little different. I have described the tone of D&D games as running on a scale where Game of Thrones and like the Joe Abercrombie sort of books and all of that stuff is on one side, and then Monty Python and the Holy Grail is on the other side. And I want our campaign to feel like it can have room for humor and goofs and that kind of thing. But we are not making the game the butt of the joke. We're still just going to have fun around the table, but we're going in serious about the fantasy, I think. We'll see what happens when we get to character creation and people want to make a character who feels very at odds with the feel of the D&D world, but I am going to be resistant to, or encourage, I guess, the players not to make comedy one-note characters, because you get sick of the joke after a while, right? Unless you are somebody who really likes hammering home the same joke, which is probably going to be miserable for the other players. So I doubt anybody is going to come into it with that idea, but I feel like that's also an opportunity for them to actually take it seriously. And like when the stakes start to appear in the story, like when the chips are down and these characters have to make difficult decisions, that's when you find out what Hingle McCringleberry is going to do to save the village or whatever. I'm stealing that from Key and Peele, so shout out to Key and Peele. And these are all people who, at various points in just doing what they do in Minecraft, have come up with RPG archetype characters. Like Scar has been a wizard at various other times, right? He's obviously like doing the ranger thing with Hot Guy. Gemini Tay sort of oscillates between like ranger and druid and all that kind of stuff. I heard her say on stream that she's planning on maybe making a rogue. That makes me excited. I think Gem as a rogue is going to be kind of incredible. But Gem has played Baldur's Gate, so Gem at least sort of knows a little bit about what classes are out there. And Hot Guy's an assassin. Yeah, I think the thing is, with D&D and the state that it's in right now, maybe not fresh out of the player's handbook, but when you look at some of the other subclasses and the stuff that's available in the broader source material, basically any class has a subclass that turns it into approximately any other class, right? Like, you look at Four Elements Monk, that's a spellcaster. You look at Arcane Trickster Rogue, that's a spellcaster. But there's still enough flavor difference between, let's say, Arcane Trickster Rogue and Trickery Domain Cleric that's going to make them feel distinctly different. Bards and Barbarians, they're going to have different hit dice and maybe different, like, proficiencies with armor and stuff, but there are some things that make those two classes very similar when you get into the subclass stuff. Yeah, Eldritch Knight, also a spellcaster, yes. So I would love to hear everyone's interpretations of who you think each of these players should build. Like, what character archetypes you think work for them. Because I have my opinions, but I also think our opinions are informed by stuff we've seen them do on, you know, Hermitcraft and Life series, and I think it would be really interesting for them to break the mold and go very different. Like, I would love to see Grian playing like a paladin. Can you imagine Grian being a lawful good character ever? And it's easier to cast all of the Redstone folks as artificers, right? And Impulse has obviously been a dwarf in previous seasons of Hermitcraft. Does he want to go that route this time? It would be interesting to see him do that. It would be also interesting to see if he didn't. I'm just saying I'm not going to pigeonhole anybody quite yet, you know what I mean? Impulse as a dwarf cleric would be lovely, I agree. I would also love to see him play a Goliath. Go completely the other direction, right? Scar could be a sorcerer firebug. Yeah, I think that's another thing. Because they probably don't want this to be anything to do with Hermitcraft as an identity, as a brand, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if they're going to do stuff that specifically references Hermitcraft, so I don't know if you want to have Scar setting fire to stuff. That feels like bringing Hermitcraft energy to a non-Hermitcraft project. What, in my opinion, is the best class to play for one-shots? What would you bank on? There is no best class. There's absolutely no best class. If it's your first time playing D&D, there are certainly characters who you will find it easier to play. Like, there are classes you might find it easy to play. The 2024 Player's Handbook suggests rogues and fighters as low difficulty classes for somebody starting out. Because a rogue is pretty straightforward. You're a dexterity-based character, you have daggers and stuff, you have sneak attack as an ability. You get to use that a lot because usually there's a lot of other people in combat with you and you can find places to hide and that kind of thing. And then fighter is basically like, you stand still and you hit stuff with a sword. Obviously, there is a lot more nuance to it than either of those, but if it's your first time playing the game, those are good starting points. They are not, however, everybody's cup of tea. You might not want to be a melee fighter. Part of the power fantasy of playing D&D for you might be, I want to cast spells. And not all spellcasters have to be super complicated, right? Like, you can do plenty with a wizard. It's just that as you move on through a campaign, you will find that the wizard stuff gets a little bit more complex. That's okay. It can be complex if you want it to be. We're going to start at level 1, MigFX. We are going to start at level 1, because I feel like a one-shot at level 1 is going to give them a good foundational understanding of the mechanics without getting bogged down with them having too much stuff going on. Like, I don't want them to pick subclasses right away, because I want character creation to be fairly straightforward. And they have evened out, they've, like, flattened a lot of the stuff about when characters get certain abilities in 2024 edition. So everybody is going to be leveling up and learning stuff at the same time, provided that we continue with these characters after a one-shot, which is, again, not a guarantee. Either Scar or Green could be a warlock. I would love that. I think that'd be really fun. Figuring out who their patron was and stuff, that'd be really great. But again, warlocks don't get their patron until later in 5e 2024, so played D&D for a few years and offered to DM my first campaign soon. Any good advice for a first-time DM? Listen to what your players are doing. I think that's the most important part, is tailoring things to your players' wishes, and not necessarily like, you know, if your players would wish to have an encounter go super easy on them or whatever, then consider why. Like, you got to read between the lines a little bit about what players actually want and what they need. Tailoring things to your players' interests is the most important thing. Like, if your players want to just participate in combat, if they just want to do dungeon crawls and earn cool loot, that should be the focus of your campaign. You can introduce other elements, but, you know, running some sort of, like, mystery scenario that's all social and, like, you know, social deduction isn't going to make any sense for a party that wants combat, and vice versa. Like, if you're throwing combat encounters at them every 5 feet, they're not necessarily going to enjoy that if they're a party that came into this to roleplay. Unless they're really good at role-playing combat, and there's not always a lot of time for roleplay in combat if you want to keep things moving. Yeah, ask them what they want. Communication is the most important thing, 100%. Start an open dialogue with the players and keep it open, and don't think of yourself as an adversary to the party. My philosophy with DMing is always to be your player's #1 fan. You want them to succeed, and you are constructing a world that does not want them to succeed, but you as a dungeon master need to be on the play. Like, look at the D&D cartoon from, like, the 80s or whenever it was. The dungeon master is on their side. Like, if they want the heroic power fantasy, you just trying to stomp them flat and aiming for a total party kill is a massive mistake, in my opinion. Yeah, as a DM, you're a player too, exactly. Also, don't try to emulate whoever your favorite dungeon master is. Like, don't try and go all Matt Mercer on them, because everybody else at the table is not going to be the cast of Critical Role for you, you know? Had a really fun time insisting our DM was playing with us, not just running a game for us. Exactly, yes. First and foremost, D&D is a collaborative storytelling engine, with some dice rolling involved. You, as the DM, are a collaborator, not an adversary. And most likely any table where you see that as the case, like anytime you see those sort of more sensationalized clips of Critical Role's current campaign where they're like, Brennelly Mulligan absolutely destroys player at the table, leaves them in tears. They're all actors. And that's part of it for them, is they want to get the dramatic moments out of it. They probably also want to make something that can be turned into a dramatic cartoon later. So I do think it's worth remembering that that's not the DM's job. That is what they have decided that campaign should feel like for both the players and the audience. I've seen people calling it pigs because it's Pixorif's Impulse, Gem, Grian, Scar, which I think is quite funny. We don't have a proper, like, name for it yet, because naming a D&D group at this point is like naming a D&D. It's like naming a Minecraft server. If you're naming like a D&D project, all of the catchy, fun names are either already taken or too generic. So we'll see, like, if we come up with a proper name for it. A couple have been thrown around, but we're not, like, super attached to any of them at present. What is and how much is Foundry? So Foundry is sort of, it's a virtual tabletop environment like Roll20. It is a one-time purchase, not a subscription, and it's desktop software that you basically start up a server and you can send people who are playing in your game the IP address and, like, set up usernames and passwords and stuff so they can join without making an account. So it's desktop software for you, browser-based for everybody else. And it works the same way something like Roll20 would, where you can show battle maps and store information for character sheets and stuff like that, and everything is in a clickable interface with keyboard controls as well. I prefer Foundry over D&D Beyond. I've never used D&D Beyond, but as usual, I'm going to go with the stuff that I'm familiar with, and I'm also going to go with the stuff that is, in the case of Foundry, system agnostic. Like, there are modules you can install for Foundry that work for lots of other different systems, so I've run Morg Borg through it. I have run a couple of other bits and pieces through it, as well as D&D. I have a Vaesen module that I can run through Foundry that I also want to do an online game of at some stage. But yeah, I have no experience with D&D Beyond, and I'd rather not learn something completely from scratch if I'm doing something like this. The tone and setting of the campaign is going to be heroic fantasy, basically as close to default D&D as we can get. It's not going to be related to Minecraft or Hermitcraft in any way, unless the players decide to bring in some aspect of their character that they've done like a bit on Hermitcraft with before, but that's entirely up to the players. I am not going to be including anything Hermitcraft related into the story. Nothing Minecraft related either, pretty much. If the players pick up a pickaxe at some point, that's not my fault. The setting and the adventures are going to be homebrew. And there's a few good reasons for that, I think. The first being, I am not particularly well-versed in the canon lore of any D&D setting. I haven't learned the game that way. I've not really immersed myself in any of the lore about it. I will say, I bought the 2024 DM's handbook for this. It has a really great guide to the original Greyhawk setting that Gary Gygax made for his Dungeons & Dragons players. And I'd not really seen stuff like that before. Like, I have the guide to Wildmount, but that's obviously the Critical Role thing, so I wouldn't set an adventure there anyway if we are coming through and streaming it for the first time. I've never really gotten stuck into Dragonlance or Eberron or Forgotten Realms or anything, so it's really just going to be like a very small-scale version of a bigger D&D world that I will be making up from scratch myself. I'm going to probably be using, like, the cosmological model from D&D with, like, the material plane and Faerun and the Shadowfell and all of the outer planes and stuff, because that feels like what all of the rules are there to support in a lot of ways, and all of the, like, monster stat blocks and stuff. But it's not going to be Forgotten Realms or Faerun, or I'm going to be making that stuff up. I love doing fantasy world building, as you probably know about me from having watched anything I've done on, like, Empires or whatever. Is like, the world building stuff is my jam. And I think that also has the opportunity to both tailor things to the player's interests, so I'm not running like a pre-established module, and also we can kind of make it our own. We can sort of claim full ownership of it as a product, you know? So I think that stuff is going to be pretty locked in as being homebrew. But obviously using a lot of what the D&D system provides in terms of creatures, character classes, bits and pieces of the setting that we can just take and make our own, you know? Any spoilers on the plot? No. I will not be sharing details of the plot. First of all, I don't want to get that stuff back to the players, and that's another reason that I don't want to run either a published campaign module or something in a pre-existing setting, is because then there is more possibility for the players to be spoiled, either by like an errant Google search or somebody literally going into their chat or YouTube comments or whatever and telling them what's going to happen next because they think it will be helpful somehow, right? Like, sometimes people are like that. But I also don't want people bombarded with information about the setting from people who are very enthusiastic about the pre-existing D&D canon. Because there are some things that the players might know, but their characters might not know. And it's very difficult to understand where that line blurs. But there are a lot of very knowledgeable people out there, and while I think that's a great thing to have as part of the community, I don't want it to shape the player's experience. Like, I don't want them to feel overwhelmed and think that they have to know all of the stuff that people in the comments are telling them, right? Is the plot written out pre-playing entirely, or does it evolve naturally with only a small starter plot? Approaches vary. Personally, I have a fairly self-contained adventure that I want them to go on. And even if things go off the rails, I'm fairly experienced with getting things back on track. With this group of players especially, with the reputation for mischief that Grian and Scar have, I think a lot of people are expecting them to just be chaotic at the table, but I think both of them, as professional content creators, understand that we're also just here to have a good time and make good content. And if them messing around is good content, then great. We will let it ride for as long as it needs to. But when they recognize that we need to get back to the story side of things, I will be there to pick that up for them. But I genuinely don't think it's going to be anywhere near as chaotic as people think, because they're still also going to have to figure out, is this how we play Dungeons & Dragons? I believe you're the best DM for this group because you're so calm generally. Thanks, yeah, being stoic does have its advantages. Scar is going to pickpocket everyone. I mean, if he's a rogue, he's welcome to do that. I'll be loading characters' pockets with loot if he decides that's one of the things he wants to focus on. There will also be pretty severe consequences for when he messes up. So a couple of other things, since, you know, there are probably going to be questions about this. We're going to keep the language family-friendly, because we recognize that these are mostly creators with a family-friendly reputation. And we want everyone who is part of our existing audience to be welcome watching the stream. Occasionally, adult themes may come up, like violence is almost certainly going to be a part of it, because that is one of the core tenets of D&D. It is heroic fantasy. People are going to get hurt. Monsters are going to happen, that kind of thing. Am I going to run PvP? Almost certainly not. Unless that is something that the player's mandate has to be part of it. I do not think PvP has a place, especially in a one-shot. Like, if they are interested in having a bit of a fight, just as like a one-off thing, especially if it does not affect whether or not those characters, like, live or die, I'd be happy to let them try it, but they're going to be fairly low-level characters, so they're not going to have, like, a ton of stuff they can do aside from stand and bang, you know? Out of curiosity, how do you handle rogues in combat? I've always had an issue properly rewarding rogues, and 1 hit per turn seems pretty devastating. I know Jem wants to be a rogue, so I'm mostly just wondering. Give them an environment that they can do rogue stuff in. Like, give them places to hide. Allow them to use their sneak attack a bunch. Like, if they only get 1 attack, make it count. Nothing is going to be more satisfying to a rogue than successfully pulling off an attack that does more damage than the fighter does, because they were able to sneak up and, like, stab somebody while the enemy was distracted. And give them stuff in the scene that could create a distraction. Even if it's as simple as there's some broken furniture nearby, they throw that over to the other side of the room, it creates a big clatter, and then they come up and shank someone. Like, there's plenty of stuff to improvise. I think so much of it is up to the players, but as long as you make it known that that stuff is there and that player creativity is going to allow for a lot of interesting opportunities during combat. Rogue sneak attack hits really hard and it scales well. Yeah, exactly. Like, I think you basically have to make sure your rogue knows that the most effective they are going to be is when they sneak attack. And then you just keep adding different flavor to it if it feels like it's getting stale. Like, if it gets around to that player's turn, they're like, alright, I sneak attack. It's like, no, how do you sneak attack? Do you say something cool when you come up behind somebody with a dagger, you know? So I pretty much covered everything that I had in mind as like an FAQ, but I would really like to know if you guys have any other questions about what's going on here. I won't be able to disclose any information about the plot. The other thing I want to say, actually, the other thing is that if we end up running something a little closer to a longer campaign, like if it turns out that people are really invested, having a lot of fun, and they want me to prep more stuff for them to do, would you be interested in me streaming campaign prep? because that is something I would consider doing as long as anybody who attends those streams adheres to a pact of secrecy. A lot of people saying yes, some people saying no, which I understand. Like, I think some people don't want spoilers. I think some people are just here to watch me play Minecraft, which is entirely fair. But yeah, I do think it would be really fun to do that, and it would also mean that I can combine both people's enthusiasm for the campaign, if it seems to be taking off, and the amount of time it would take me to prep stuff. Like, it would be really great to use a stream for that. Maybe instead of doing like a bonus game like Elden Ring or whatever, I'd do some D&D campaign prep, and it would allow for people to get a bit of a fun behind-the-scenes look at what we were doing. Once again, as long as they're not going to tell any of the players what's going on. You're basically signing an NDA, or what was it Jem said the other day? A DNR, as in we will not resuscitate you if the mods bot you for sharing the details of this campaign outside of the stream. But yeah, I would be happy to do that. I will obviously check in with the players to make sure that they would be comfortable with me doing that as well, because I recognize some of them probably don't want the details of the campaign out there, but it would really mean that I could use the time I have wisely and allow people a really fun behind-the-scenes peek at what it takes to put together a campaign. Secrecy never works, though. Well, the other side of the secrecy angle is people not reading their comments, but I obviously want to make sure that the creators would be okay with that. Love to watch campaign prep, don't trust some part of chat not to snitch. Oh, yeah, I agree. But I think also some of the campaign prep I could do could be vague enough that it wouldn't be really obvious that, like, oh, there's a trap here, make sure you avoid it, or whatever. Like, I think I'd probably put together some of the environments, but not do absolutely everything, not populate them with traps and enemies and that kind of stuff until everything was, like, off-screen. And I maybe wouldn't give context for, like, what was going on in a scene. I would just be able to design an environment, write up a couple of notes, that kind of thing. This campaign is not being played in the realm of Minecraft. No, it is not connected to Minecraft at all. It's going to be as close to canon D&D as we can get whilst homebrewing the setting. So we're going to be using D&D rules, D&D setting and creatures, nothing to do with Minecraft or Hermitcraft whatsoever. And that's honestly more comfortable for me, because I think if there was to be an RPG version of Minecraft, it would have to be a system that worked with Minecraft, that allowed stuff like crafting, which can be a thing in D&D. Like, you can spend time, you know, making potions or memorizing spells or whatever, and all of that is part of the game. But I feel like if you try and put Minecraft stuff into D&D, you have to do a lot of work to get it to align properly, you know? Yes, I am going to be the DM, yes. The campaign is going to be streamed on Twitch. I don't think any of them are going to stream it to YouTube as well. They will be posting it to YouTube as VODs later, as will I. I don't tend to upload all of my VODs these days because Minecraft stuff typically is fairly repetitive resource grind. And I don't think there's a ton of value in each of these streams because they're mostly single player. I feel like a lot of the reason that it makes sense for the Hermits to upload their streams is because they've got a lot of, like, multiplayer interactions and stuff in there. Which I don't on this. And most of the time I'm not really doing anything that's, like, super pertinent to upload for the sake of Survival Guide as a system, but as a series. But I will definitely be uploading the VODs of GIGGS D&D. Is it in Forgotten Realms? It's in my own homebrew universe, because I don't know enough about individual settings, and it means people don't end up getting prior information about the setting. And with the homebrew setting, we can more easily tailor things to the player character's interests and the player's interests. Have there been any announcements for player races and classes? No. They have not said what they want because I don't think they know yet. Based on the discussions we've had in Discord, a couple of them have some loose ideas, but of all of them, I think Grian is perhaps the only one who's had actually had the Player's Handbook delivered so far. What kind of classes do I think they'll probably end up as? I know Jem was on stream the other day talking about being a rogue, and I don't want to pigeonhole any of them and be like, first thought, best thought, you have to play that character now. Because once they pick up the Player's Handbook, they might realize, oh yeah, no, there's some other stuff that sounds really good. But I think it would be really fun if they play against type a little bit, maybe. If they kind of challenge themselves to be something a little different. Like, I know Impulse has been like a dwarf kind of character on Hermitcraft before. I like the idea of him being something a little different. I want to see Impulse playing like an elf, you know? Will you let multiple players take the same class? I think we would have a proper discussion about that, and I would make sure it was what they wanted to do. There is obviously some mileage in doing like an Oops All Bards campaign, because subclasses come into play after a certain point, and I think it is possible through the subclasses that 5th edition now has for any character to have vastly different abilities and still be the same base class. I DM a nearly all bard campaign, it's very fun. Yeah, but then you have bards that are like, you know, you can have the College of Swords and the College of this and that, and I've not really played much with bards, so I don't know all of the subclasses off the top of my head, but yeah, genuinely, you could have a very diverse party all starting as the same class. The main reason I would want to avoid that right now is because they would be starting at level 1, and every character would play the same to begin with before they had a chance to specialize. Impulse could be a half-dwarf. I think the 2024 rulebook doesn't have a ton of, like, half lineages anymore. Like, the ancestry is much more, like, static. And I think that's something we could potentially rule for if people wanted to go that way, but, like, I don't know if it matters that much. Do you have an idea if you'll be limiting anything like Silvery Barbs, for example? I don't think so off the top of my head. I think I'll be happy to let the players decide on what they want to do, and we'll run the one-shot. We won't limit anything, and then if I realize that some stuff is a little bit broken, or there's some stuff that I really want to change, I will change that, but I don't have any kind of pretensions about, like, imposing unnecessary restrictions on the players right up front. Like, I just want to get them in there, get them used to playing D&D, make sure everyone has fun first and foremost. And then if they're overall in agreement that, like, this or that thing feels a little bit too powerful, let's maybe roll that back or use it a little bit less. Like, we can work together on that. But that's, I think, the most important thing about the table, again, is making sure everyone's on the same page, communicating about all of that stuff, and working together on it. Like, the players have already had a couple of really fun ideas for how to introduce them to both the system and the environment, because we're going to be running it through Foundry, and none of them have used Foundry before. So I have been working on something over the last, like, 12, 24 hours, whatever it would be at this point, since it was suggested, and I am now absolutely obsessed with what we're going to be doing in Session 0 after they're finished with character creation, because I want to run, like, a little, like, a prologue, more or less. And at first it was just going to be narration, but then Grian said it might make sense for us to have a little bit of a tutorial as part of Session 0, so that then we can just get into it in Session 1. And I was like, great, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And it's hilarious. It's going to be really, really funny. Is everyone prepared for combat to take ages? We will see. I think it's going to be fairly streamlined, considering we're doing it in a virtual tabletop, and so if people decide what they want to do, like, Foundry is a really cool system. I wish I could show you some of it right now, but I don't have the stream set up to, like, capture it, and it would also give away some of the stuff that I've been doing. But Foundry does all of the maths for you, for one thing, so you can click on whatever weapon you want to swing and just hit roll, and it will add your proficiency bonus if you're proficient with that weapon. It will add the relevant, like, attack bonus from whatever stat that weapon uses. All of that stuff is plug and play with the 5th edition player handbook module that I already have installed. Foundry's character sheet system also has a favorites section. So if there's something that you know you're going to be using a lot, like if you've got a short sword and you basically swing that short sword every time you go into combat, or if you've got a spell that's basically your go-to damage spell, like you're a warlock and you Eldritch Blast stuff all the time, there's like a favorites column at the front of your character sheet on the left-hand side, and you can just click on stuff from there instead of tabbing through the rest of your character sheet to find stuff. And I think that's going to be very helpful in making combat run quickly. But also, combat is not going to be particularly slow, considering we're starting level 1 and characters have fairly limited options. later on, once the players are more familiar with the system, if we end up playing more, there'll be the opportunity for combat to get more complex, but by that point, I think they will understand what the basics are. Any concerns about how squishy level 1 characters are? Not for the adventure I have planned. Like, I'm pretty confident I can run low-level combat without the characters dying. I've also been running a lot of Morg Borg this year, in which it's possible for a character to start with literally 1 health point, and yet somehow the characters still survive. I've actually not had that many character deaths in running Morg Borg, a system where it seems like the point is for characters to die. So, I think generally speaking, we're going to be fine. Yeah, your character can start with 1 HP in a dream. But the way it works in Morg Borg is you can also have armor. Actually subtracts from the amount of damage you take from an attack. So instead of being like an armor class thing, you roll to dodge, and if the enemy hits you, you might still be wearing heavy armor, which makes you easier to hit. Like the DC for hitting you is a lot easier, but you roll a D6 to see how much damage your armor subtracts from the damage that creature does to you. And if you roll a 6 and the max they can do is a D6, then you're good. Like, the armor absorbs the entire hit, which means your 1 point of health remains intact. Then again, I have had a character killed in the first minute of a game by a landslide. So that's Morg Borg, though. Morg Borg is designed to be brutal. It's an OSR system. It's sort of based on original D&D, where a spellcaster would have like 4 hit points. In 5e D&D, it is very difficult to actually kill a character. Like, they have 3 death saving throws. Provided they don't roll a 1, they'll probably be okay for 3 rounds of combat until somebody else can come and, like, pick them up. I don't know if we're even going to have a character downed in the encounters I have planned, but I'd be open to it happening. I just don't think they will die. It is also my job to make sure the players are getting what they want out of it, and if the player is really attached to their character and they don't want their character to die, I've got an ear open for that, you know? I'm not one of those people who feels like I have to be entirely neutral on things. Like a wildlife documentarian, where I'm like, we can't interfere, you know? I am fully on board with listening to my players' wishes and just making it satisfying narratively that player gets a little bit scraped up but comes out of it alive. But we will see what happens, and we will see what people are up for, because I'm also fine with it being brutal if whoever it is decides, no, this makes sense in service of the story, right? If we want this party to feel like they're in Game of Thrones, I will give them Game of Thrones. But I don't want to impose that on people who are new to D&D. If they're like, actually, this felt easy, I'm like, okay, well, maybe we turn up the difficulty next time. Maybe we have the enemies act more intelligently. But I'm also happy to give them a few, like, mindless grunts to wail on while they're still learning how to swing a sword, you know? How will leveling work? Milestone, probably. I'm expecting that if the players enjoy this one-shot, they'll get through the one-shot and they'll be level 2. Like, I don't know if we will level up during the session. I would like to do leveling with them on camera, because I think I actually really enjoy hearing that stuff or watching that stuff happen. I like seeing what choices players make. But then, if we feel like the stream ends, the characters are still going to be level 1, they will be level 2 if they complete the adventure I have in mind for them, which they should. If they don't, I have done something wrong. But like, that will be the experience that gets them to level 2, and if we do another session after that, we'll start at level 2. And, you know, if we do a short campaign, potentially they could be like level 5 by the end of that. I don't think we would want to go beyond level 5 if we're doing like a short-ish campaign. I do not imagine this being a campaign where the players get to like level 20. But if they want to do it, I will consider it. It is something I've never done before. I don't think I have ever DM'd for characters who are higher than like level 10. I would absolutely be open to doing it, but I'd be learning as I go in terms of, like, balancing combat and stuff. But at that point, I could do all the research I wanted, so it would take them a long time to get to level 10. If I've got any tips for learning a new TTRPG system, my players want to play Magnus Archives, so now I've got to learn Cypher. I had some fun with Cypher. I played Cypher at my friend James's house. James runs a bunch of games that I have played a few of. Yeah, Cypher's alright. In terms of learning a new system, it's often a good time to like look for either tutorials or actual play stuff, because I find that practical examples really help. Kind of similar to when I'm learning stuff in Minecraft. It's like I really learn best from seeing it done or getting my hands dirty and just trying it. I don't tend to read rulebooks cover to cover and then come away with like a perfect understanding of how that stuff works. Thoughts on the D&D and Stranger Things? Haven't watched the show, so I wouldn't know. What's my favorite unserious system I've used? I consider Morg Borg fairly unserious. But I've been playing a couple of Grant Howitt one-shots this year, my favorite of which was Kenku Bin Wizards, although my second favorite was I'm going to tell my kids this was D&D, which was also very fun. Kenku Bin Wizards is based on the Kenku race from D&D, but you're basically like a crow person who lives in a bin, and you're inventing illegal magic and just messing with people in this urban environment, and it's really fun. I also ran a Morg Borg one-shot where we burned the Yavla goat, which was the one that we keep referencing in the Hermitcraft recap now. Because it fell over this year. I'm so happy about that. Am I going to use vestiges? Remind me what those are. That might be a part of the Player's Handbook stuff I haven't got to yet. I am quite interested in using bastions. If we get to the point where we're doing like a short campaign, I would really love them to have a base to work from. Because having played Vaesen this year, I really like the fact that you could basically upgrade the castle that you earn by playing the starter adventure of Vaesen. Vestiges, critical role, super items. Is it specifically a critical role thing? Oh, okay. Then probably not. Like, not to hate on critical role specifically or anything, but yeah, I prefer that stuff to be more kind of like codified D&D. It's kind of like, I think of like playing with rules from Critical Role or like the Critical Role setting as like playing modded Minecraft, you know? And I'm very much like a vanilla Minecraft guy, so I kind of feel the same about D&D. I'm like, I will take the baseline rules of D&D and create what I want out of them, and there might be a couple of house rules here and there that I crib from other places, but yeah, if it's something that's specifically related to Critical Role and we're making our own like streaming series, I don't necessarily want to take elements of the way they play their game and be like, we're doing the Critical Role thing now, you know? Can functionally introduce bastions from level 3 quest driven rather than just to flip the switch at level 5. Yeah, like I think it'd be really fun to have the player characters like exploring a castle, clear the place out, and then be like, hey, you own this place now. Like, nobody else is using it, so if you want to renovate the castle, go for it. Most important rule of streaming D&D, if the audience thinks anyone's made an error, that's actually a house rule. Exactly. Yeah, we are going to be fairly minimal in our audience interaction when we're playing, and we are likely to be ignoring any kind of feedback that people have with regards to our application of the rules, purely because we just want to play the game our way. How do I enjoy playing Daggerheart? I like Daggerheart a lot. I think it's got a lot to recommend about it. I think it seems pretty easy to pick up and learn. I think the thing about Daggerheart for me, it's difficult to go into Daggerheart without drawing immediate comparisons to D&D. And D&D has the advantage of age over Daggerheart, and as such it has like a legacy of sorts. And I think the difficulty with Daggerheart is that they have tried to make a world that feels as vibrant and alive as D&D immediately. And it hasn't got like the, for want of a better term, the pedigree yet. Obviously difficult to go into making an RPG from scratch, coming up with a unique system, and also helping the world feel like unique and alive. But I feel like what I like about Daggerheart mechanically, I find the setting kind of bland. Because it's really just, we're doing high fantasy role-playing again. And obviously it's a system you could adapt to all sorts of settings, but then again, so is every RPG system, really. You just got to be good at switching the names of things and understand the flavor. I think the system of Daggerheart is different enough that it feels very different to just, like, we're reskinning D&D. But I feel like the flavor of Daggerheart is, like, near identical to D&D. But I haven't played enough of it, maybe, to understand it. And I've also been playing it in the context of Martin doing a scenario based on misadventures, which is its own kind of thing, right? Like, it's naturally going to feel a little bit derivative because it's derivative of what we've been doing in Minecraft. Would I ever consider making my own RPG? No. I'm not really a game designer. I think there are so many fantastic ideas out there that I can piece together into my own thing, but I'm not personally interested in coming up with my own game system. What am I building in this giant hole? So, to address the Minecraft in the room, I'm building a massive copper aging redstone contraption that helps me spread the copper out 4 blocks apart. I built this on Empires Season 1 originally. Iterations of it have been in the survival guide before. I built this on Hermitcraft Season 9 as well. I now have a really large version of it that I built in Creative, but have never built in Survival, which can age an entire shulker box worth of copper all at the same time, and has a lot more automated loading and unloading. I have not been able to build it because it's massive, and I've never had the... You know, I've never put the time and effort into building it in any of the previous series that I've done. I feel like when I designed this, it was around the time SOS was starting, and there was no way I was going to build it in SOS because I was digging the hole. So I decided now I'm going to dig this hole, and with this survival guide world being a long-term world, it made for a good opportunity to actually build this version of the machine. Where can you find a good tutorial or something similar to understand D&D? Ginny D is very good. Very approachable videos, very good style, very friendly. Find either like a podcast or a show or a group playing D&D that you really like and learn about things passively by watching them is a really great way of doing it. Alternatively, play Baldur's Gate. It's not 100% D&D for me because while it's using the D&D system, the dice rolls, the character classes, the licensing is all Dungeons & Dragons. For me, D&D really is about a collaborative storytelling experience, and what I see Baldur's Gate as being is a sort of rough simulation of that. Despite the amount of agency they give you in making these decisions, you can't say no to the scenario and just go and do something else. And I feel like that's the most important thing about D&D for me, is the collaborative nature of storytelling at the table. Like, you are participating in their story, they are just giving you a massive web of choices that you can make. But I feel like that differs from how D&D is really played for me, which is one of the reasons I haven't played it. I've heard good things about Matt Colville as well. I know he's obviously working on his own system, Draw Steel, right now. Draw Steel feels like Pathfinder to me, from what I've seen of it. Like, I read the quick start a little while ago because somebody in my local TTRPG chapter was interested in running it, and we didn't end up playing in the end, which was kind of a shame. But it felt like Pathfinder in the way that it explained, like, action economy and stuff. I think, yeah, one of the things about Baldur's Gate is that it sort of strips away some of the theatre of the mind stuff that I feel like is essential to playing D&D. Even though I'm going to be running this GIGGS game with maps and stuff, I want people to be able to imagine stuff in the scene that I haven't necessarily drawn on the map. Like, if they want to swing from a chandelier and the maps are all top-down, I'll be like, yeah, there's a chandelier there. You can swing from it if you want to, you know. I want players to feel like they're interacting with the environment that way. Whereas when you make a video game, you have to make everything in the environment that the player can interact with, because the player can't just summon a chandelier to swing from. Yeah, I want every opportunity for the player characters to be able to channel Seer. Absolutely. If they want to come in like a wrecking ball, I will let them do that too. How are we doing stats? I think, and I will discuss this with the group beforehand, but I think we'll probably be rolling for stats. And I think the group would agree with me, rather than doing standard array or like a point buy thing. I think point buy is a little bit too technical feeling for me. Standard array would be fine, but I like there being big swings. Like, I test rolled a bunch of stats just to make sure I was familiar with character creation in Foundry earlier today, and one of the stats, I think I got like a 17, which obviously, like, before background added like bonuses and stuff, like that took me up to an 18, so I had a +4, but I also had 2 stats which were 7, I think. So it was like I had to have 2 dump stats for this like bard that I was making, and so obviously they had like a +4 in charisma, but they had like a -2 in a couple of other things. But yeah, 46 drop lowest is how we'll be doing it if we're rolling. 3d6 if it was something like Shadow Dark. But Shadow Dark also has the house rule, which I might... I mean, it's not even a house rule. I think it's in the rulebook that I might adapt for for us rolling stats, if we roll for them, is if you don't get any numbers that are higher than, I think it's 14 and up, you have the opportunity to roll again. And so I would want to make sure that everybody had at least one strong stat. Like, if somebody just gets really shoddy luck and ends up rolling, like, 10s and below for all of their stats, yeah, I would let them roll again. My last character had a 3 in intelligence. I loved it. Yeah, and here's the thing. Here's my philosophy with stats as well. Just because your character doesn't have a high intelligence does not mean they're, like, monosyllabic, right? Because it's like the wizard magic stat. It's about your ability to retain information, and it's about your ability to learn from books. If your character's not a reader, that makes it very different from them being just stupid, quote unquote, right? Like, your character can have a 3 in intelligence, but like a 16 in wisdom. How do you reconcile those things? Like, that character is not learned, but they are wise. And maybe, like, they have not studied under great philosophers, but the philosophy of their own life just suggests things naturally to them, right? Like, it's not necessarily... You don't have to base your character's personality around them. If you want to, if that helps you roleplay at the table, great. And if, like, your character has a low strength score and you feel like they are just sort of, like, feeble, maybe that's from an old injury or something. Maybe that's, like, you know, they were stronger once than they are now. Excuse me. Maybe they're an older character. Like, my monk that I play in the 8-bit community campaign is an old man. And I made strength his lowest stat because monks typically use dex and wisdom. They're dexterity-based fighters, and, like, wisdom helps with AC and stuff. So you don't use the strength stat at all, and it makes perfect sense to me that his strength stat is, like, his strength modifier is a -1, because he's an old man. Like, his bones are hardened by all of the hand-to-hand fighting, but he's also potentially a little bit fragile. Like, he has a lower constitution score than I would like as well, because he has really low health. But I think that makes sense, because he's an old man. Intelligence is knowing tomatoes are a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put them in a fruit salad. There you go. That's a good way of putting it. Grog from Critical Role Campaign 1 had an int of 3. Yeah, exactly. Like, sometimes you roll low. Sometimes you're going to roll 4 1s. Do I play online or IRL with friends or both? So I've played online with my home group that I learned D&D from, because that's a group that is spread out over multiple places and time zones. With most of my friends, I play in person now. Like, I played pretty regular games locally for the last year, and I really enjoy that. I think it's great to actually have people around the same table. Like, it's very different to running it in a Discord call. The other thing I do is 8-bit community Dungeons & Dragons, which is also an online thing, because a bunch of them are based in the US. Have you considered systems other than D&D, such as Draw Steel? I have considered them for my own gameplay, and I've played a lot of different systems this year. When they approached me asking me to DM, they wanted to play D&D, so I was not interested in changing their minds on that. Much as people might argue, once they've had more experience with tabletop games, that this or that other system is going to be better than D&D, they've got to start somewhere, and D&D at this point has that sort of household name status that makes it easier for people to get into, because they sort of know what D&D is. In the same way that fantasy readers or movie watchers know what Lord of the Rings is. Even if they haven't seen it before, they sort of understand the cultural place that it holds. And D&D is also, frankly, going to be easier to get more people excited about from the audience, which is going to be a big draw for anybody who's like, if you're streaming something or making a video about something, people get very cynical about this, and I always kind of push back against it, where they say, like, you know, you're just chasing views or whatever. It's like, yeah, because we want to entertain the biggest amount of people, because we want more people to be entertained by what we do. I don't see how that's a bad thing. And I think D&D is going to be the most approachable thing for an audience who is interested in watching this group play tabletop role-playing games. Like, I think if we came out of the gate trying to do something like Pathfinder or Draw Steel, for a start, they would be less into it because they don't know what those things are. regardless of having played D&D before, I think people understand what D&D is. But also I find Pathfinder very crunchy. I haven't had any experience with Draw Steel, but what I've read of it also seems kind of crunchy. I feel like D&D has been refined over the years to be fairly approachable, even if the system itself has a lot of depth. I think you can kind of take it or leave it with some of that depth and still play D&D. The modifiers you add for Pathfinder are crazy compared to D&D. Yeah, and like all of the action economy stuff, all of the things of like... In D&D, it's pretty straightforward just to tell people, okay, on your turn you move, you have an action, and if any of your abilities say so, you have a bonus action. You also have a reaction if you're reacting to something somebody else is doing in the moment. It's like playing an instant in Magic the Gathering or whatever, right? Whereas in Pathfinder, it's like, okay, you have an action economy of 3 actions. One of them can be movement, or like as many of them as you want can be movement, so you can move up to 3 times, but you can also attack up to 3 times, and there are some things that cost you 2 actions and some things that only cost you 1, and it's just like, I'm just like overwhelmed. I'm bombarded by details, and it may just be that I'm not explaining it especially well, but that's the other thing, is that I can explain D&D well. I don't think I could necessarily explain Pathfinder well, because I have no experience GMing any version of Pathfinder. I have played it as Starfinder, so I understand as a system loosely what it does. But I think D&D is going to be much more approachable because a lot of people have played it, and a lot of people understand it, and I understand it, and they asked me to. First and foremost, that is the reason we are playing D&D, is they asked me to play D&D. I honestly think if I had suggested, like, you probably shouldn't play D&D, you should play something else first, they'll be like, all right, we'll go and ask somebody else to DM D&D for us, or it just wouldn't happen. And that is my nightmare. Like, I do not want this to not happen for them. And if I straight up said, I'm not playing D&D with you guys because I don't think you should start with D&D, and then they went on and were unable to find a DM to run D&D for them, then I would feel incredibly sad, because I want this to happen, both for them and also for the audience, because I think the audience wants to watch them play a tabletop role-playing game, and if it's D&D, great. Archeo Plays, thanks so much for the 51 months. GIGGS D&D sounds so cool. Agree on your system choice. Lots of other systems are crunchier. Others have fewer resources online for troubleshooting. Starting with D&D and then branching off if they have interest makes a lot of sense. Yes. My goal, as I said, one of my local players, Stephen, is also a fan of like Hermitcraft and them, and so I think he knew that Scar had been setting fire to a lot of stuff on this season, and so when I was running Morg Borg in 2024, I came up with a one-shot that I ran at Christmas where you burn the goal is to burn the Javlabocken, the Swedish straw goat that they erect in that town, and every year somebody tries to burn it down, and he said that, like, I should absolutely run that one-shot for Scar because he would be very interested in burning the goat. But that's Morg Borg. Like, that's a whole different system. And I would absolutely love to run Morg Borg for the Hermits. I don't think they would ever come to me and be like, hey, can you run a game of Morg Borg for us? But if they come away from this going, well, D&D was great. Are there any other games that we could play? I would be like, yes, there are. Talk to me. We'll make it happen. But, yeah, I think we need to have... D&D is like the starting blocks for this particular race, you know? And D&D fits so perfectly into the kind of roleplay that we do typically on Minecraft servers anyway, because Minecraft exists in this kind of nebulous medieval fantasy realm anyway, right? Like, Minecraft has like pickaxes and swords, and there is loosely a magic system. Everything is kind of low tech. And a lot of the building people do is medieval, and, like, you know, they've just added a spear to it. Like, it feels kind of... While Minecraft is very much in its own universe, it occupies its own space, it is so easy to graft on modern high fantasy tropes and that kind of stuff to Minecraft. Much more so than I think it is technology. Like, I think it's very strange working with tech mods and you're putting all of your industrial craft... mega furnaces down in the middle of like a grassy field somewhere. And that's really on whether or not you're a builder, but like that's kind of not my point. I feel like Minecraft is very well suited to this, hence why in previous seasons of Hermitcraft you've seen some of these creators being like wizards and dwarves and elves and druids and all that stuff. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I remember seeing a D&D Bedrock collab, but never gave it a go. The D&D map that they made for Bedrock Edition as DLC, I think was... a fun little adventure. I played a little bit of it with Sloy XP. My major problem with it is the same problem I have with video game adaptations of D&D in general, like Baldur's Gate, which is that the fun I have in D&D is in collaborative storytelling, and what most D&D video game adaptations want you to do is play a fixed story. And the thing I absolutely love about IRL D&D is that you can make the story your own as a player as much as you can as a game master. Half the enchantment names in Minecraft come from D&D. Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the things that got me into D&D in the first place was understanding that so many early video games, especially like the Final Fantasy series, like the JRPG systems that I grew up playing, began as just a computerized way of playing Dungeons and Dragons, because even the bestiary of Final Fantasy 1, like all of the enemies and stuff, and into later iterations of the series as well, it's just the D&D monster manual. They just wanted a way to computerize all of the maths that you had to do and do a fixed story that you could play as a video game. And yes, like, D&D obviously owes a lot to Tolkien and high fantasy authors of Tolkien's era. Roughly how long does it take you to create a homebrew D&D session? Running the small starter pack published book, and it still takes me forever. First time DMing, so I want to be prepared. That's fair. In my case, I'm taking longer to do this than I normally would, because I'm also making maps and stuff for it. I'm taking a little while to do it. I also, like, I want this to be a spectacular first session of D&D. I want to get them hooked. So, like, I'm taking a lot longer with it than I normally would, but if I'm prepping for a standard, like, campaign session of some sort of tabletop game, I'm looking at prepping for, like, at least 2 or 3 hours. But it also depends, because there's a lot of stuff that you can rely on generating randomly, and a lot of player feedback and stuff can go into it, right? Usually spend like 3 hours on encounters alone. See, I have perhaps a controversial opinion on balancing encounters. And it's that if they are just standard encounters, if it's not like a boss fight or something that is really important to the story, it does not matter that much. It does not matter that much, especially since a combat is going to live and die based on the randomness of people's rolls, and you don't always know how that's going to happen. Yes, of course, if you throw like a ancient dragon at a group of level 2 characters, they're not going to get out well. But, like, I do think balance in combat encounters is overrated and overwrought as a concept. And I think challenge rating is, like, a reasonable way of going about dealing with it. But genuinely, I don't think there are many encounters that can truly be perfectly balanced. You want to make sure that the party doesn't completely walk over a big villain, but, like, those are the encounters that I actually feel like they matter to the story. Random encounters and stuff like that, who cares? Sometimes the encounter isn't about winning, it's about surviving. Yeah, exactly. And, like, you create different circumstances for an encounter like that, and I think it's much more successful. If the point of the encounter is that the party, like, has to run from it, but they come away with, like, still make sure they get something out of it, you know? Whether that's information, whether that's experience, whether that's some sort of item that they're trying to swipe before the dragon can fire breath them all to death, you know, then cool. Always just adjust the fight as it goes. That's a lot easier to do in Theatre of the Mind as well. Like, I don't know if I'll be able to do that as much in Foundry, just because I'm running maps and stuff. But I can drag an extra token onto the field here and there, right? Secondary objectives are always great, so it's not just a fight of hit points. Yeah, totally. Like, I think that's the stuff that I need to work on doing more. But also when I'm running stuff for, like, the GIGGS game, I'm not going to be overthinking stuff like that. Because they are also still just going to be getting used to, how does my character attack? What makes my character effective in combat? Or what aspects of combat do I really enjoy, and what can I do to make it more fun? But yeah, adjusting the difficulty on the fly is worth remembering. Like, I forget where I heard this. I forget who I heard this from. It was a recent video I was watching where someone was saying, if an enemy has, like, a health stat block always has, like, median health, like an average health of something, like there's a specific number, and then in brackets afterwards it will say like 5d10. So with 5d10, the maximum amount of hit points this thing can have is 50. The minimum amount of hit points it could have is 5. And it's usually 5d10 plus 10 or something, right? So in that case, the minimum amount it could have is like 15 health, and the maximum it could have is 60. But as soon as the players do 15 damage to it, they have beaten what could be the weakest specimen of this type of monster, right? So that's the point at which you think, okay, they could have beaten this thing by now if I had just rolled as abysmally as possible. Is the fight dragging on? Can we wrap this up within the next couple of attacks? Can I give a character a really cool character moment if they take this thing down, even though it would have had like 45 health? If they finish it within 30 health, that also seems like roughly the average, right? Like you can do stuff like that, and it works fine as long as you haven't declared that this thing has 50 health when the players start laying into it. I'll definitely give enemies more or less health depending on what I wanted the fight to feel like and how it's actually going. A boss fight should feel like a boss fight. Yeah, exactly. Impulse likes playing a support role, but he's also very competitive. Yeah, I was on his stream the other day when he was talking about like how he doesn't want to come across as somebody who's trying to win at D&D. I think the thing I want to impress on everybody is that it's about telling a good story. Like, your characters don't even have to come out of this alive. But if they happen to go down in a blaze of glory, by going down in a fight, they sort of alert the authorities to the presence of this sort of gang of thieves or whatever that's been plotting to assassinate the king, then, you know, the party has accomplished its task, even if they die. And ultimately, that could be a really cool story if they all die in tragic and spectacular ways. But that doesn't necessarily feel great in terms of wanting to continue from that point onwards. Can you still continue if your character dies? Yeah, I mean, you make another character, for one thing. In Dungeons & Dragons, there are ways of reviving characters. There are spells that literally do bring somebody back from the dead. It varies wildly depending on both the party and the player's wishes. Like, if they would rather see that as an opportunity for that character to die dramatically and have an impact on the story, then they can go ahead and create another character. Obviously, in like Baldur's Gate, in like the D&D video games, you have the option of reviving a character who gets killed because they have a fixed story in video games and they want to make sure that some of those characters are around if the player wants them to be around. But I've had players ask me to kill their characters off so they can do something else or because they achieve their goals. Yeah, totally. Like, and if it makes for a dramatic scene at the table, especially if the other players at the table don't know that you've made that request or that you are fulfilling that request, I think it's a chance for things to be quite impactful. Yeah. Or you had a character who was like a medium and brought a dead character back so that they could still contribute. That's pretty fun. That's an inventive way of doing it, anyway. My wild magic once killed another player. I felt so bad until the DM messaged me and said that player had requested to die. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I feel like maybe the DM wouldn't have let it happen if it was like a wild magic roll as well, depending on the DM, of course. But like, yeah, as a player, it feels pretty bad to be the cause of another character's death, unless that's really part of the system. Like, when I've been running Morg Borg for people, there's been one player who has pretty regularly, whenever he has the opportunity, bought fire starting supplies and is canonically a pyromaniac. And he has definitely caused at least one actual character death. But in Morg Borg, character death is kind of expected, so there's never any, like, hard feelings about it, you know? You don't expect to stay attached to the characters for very long, you know? Wild magic characters who take other characters out tend to take themselves out soon enough. Yes, you're flying a little close to the sun, right? Had a wild magic sorcerer who became the big bad evil guy in the end because he let the wild magic take over. Yeah, you can do a lot with that. If your players are comfortable enough handing the character over to the DM in situations like that, I think it's, again, another sign of, like, real maturity in terms of making sacrifices to your own investment in the story for the sake of the story being better. Had a character die because they were flying, got knocked unconscious, lost concentration, plummeted. Rather than perishing to full damage, they fell through a swarm of wasps. And the wasps took them out before they hit the ground. That's wild. Wasps falling at terminal velocity just so they can sting you. It's pretty metal. Is there anything I want to talk about that I haven't had the chance to? Not really. Like, I want to talk about people's character classes, but they don't really have them nailed down yet, and I also want to make sure that the players are the ones who have the opportunity to reveal their character classes. Like, I don't want to ever make that announcement for them, because that seems like one of the most fun things to share with the community is like, I'm gonna be this, and then people can go, ah, and then start frantically making fan art, probably. You're right, this will be huge for the fan artists. I can't wait. Like, I'm hoping to commission a couple of people to make some art for it, and I would not be surprised if the players also do something similar. Because if we can have, like, custom tokens, then that saves me from either just plagiarizing art that I find online or using any of the default tokens that I don't, frankly, like as much in Foundry. I personally really like having tokens be more visible than the kind of top-down versions that they use. Do you have a name for the campaign? We want to come up with a proper name for it. Right now it's just GIGGS D&D, like, placeholder name. Because I said in our group call the other day, like, naming a D&D actual play is like naming a Minecraft server. Like, all the good names have been taken. There was one good name to begin with, and it's already been taken. Like, Critical Role feels like Mindcrack in that it's the only good pun that was ever made about D&D. Do some people play hardcore D&D in the way that the DM is completely impartial to character deaths? Oh, I'm sure, yeah. Like, I'm sure there are some people who want their character to just live a realistic, quote-unquote, life, and yeah, I'm sure there are DMs who do that. One of the things that has interested me this year is to start a West Marches campaign in Shadowdark, and I feel like with West Marches, it makes a lot of sense for that sort of rotating cast of players to have the occasional character death that feels dispassionate, because the focus on West Marches campaigns is not necessarily the story, it's the player decisions that drive everything. And so the players are like, we want to go investigate that castle that we found a couple of sessions ago, and the DM is like, okay, great, let me, like, we'll do that. And it's less about, like, they can bring character roleplay into it, but it's less about, like, a story the GM has in mind, and it's much more about the story that comes out of the characters playing. West Marches sounds super fun to play with Nightmare to put together. It depends entirely on how much you want to do some fantasy world building that maybe nobody will ever see. Like, you sort of have to have a more complete idea of the world than with D&D, where you can make stuff up on the fly a little bit more. Or with like, I say D&D, like it's all still D&D, like a story-based campaign, I guess. How does one create a good adventure goal for a character? On my first campaign, my sorcerer felt decent as a concept, with the whole sense of just hanging there never quite left. I may not know enough about fantasy as a setting, but that shouldn't have affected the D&D experience for a newbie. Yeah, I mean, for a campaign, it's tricky if you're not as familiar with the setting. Like, if the DM has a really strong notion of the setting, I think it's really on them to work with you to come up with goals for your character that are relevant to where they are, whether they are a specific place, like in life, or a specific place in the world. Like, is their goal, like, I think one of the simplest goals a character can have is that they are traveling to redeem something about their past. Like, put their soul at rest for something that they have done in the past. And that can go any number of ways. But, like, for a character to have regrets and want to, you know, die without regrets feels like a fairly relatable sentiment. You know, people want, like, you know, good karma or whatever it would happen to be, right? But a lot of adventurers are looking for loot, and so, you know, is the loot that you're looking for some kind of long-lost family heirloom? Is it to find out the true nature of your lineage? Because with a sorcerer especially, like, a lot of the stuff is tied to, like, a bloodline, right? It really depends on what your origin is, I suppose, but I feel like there's a lot of fodder there just in the canon description of sorcerers. It depends if you want to go cliche or if you want to go super original, but I'd say talk to your DM about it and be like, you know, I feel like I need a more established goal to really embody this character. What do you think makes sense for me in this setting? And they'll probably help you. Even if it's just that they are a long way from home and they are trying to get home. But that obviously leaves, like, if you have a particularly globe-trotting campaign, that leaves you with the possibility that your character could exit the party prematurely. It also leaves you with the possibility of, like, well, if the character's actions are all sort of based in one place, there's a chance that you'll never get home, in which case, why are you with this group of characters? But I think there's always the possibility that your character does get home only to realize that actually they have found a home, and if your D&D campaign feels like you're with a good group of players, it can be more about, like, found family, and the expectation that home is going to provide some sort of comfort is replaced with the understanding that the people you are with are the people you feel safe with, and that makes it feel like home, or that kind of thing. Yeah, revenge could just as easily be a goal, right? I think a lot of, especially, like, people who are rolling fighters or whatever, like, they often have somebody who, like, you know, kicked them out of their home, burned their town to the ground, that kind of thing. Like, the classic D&D revenge arc. Percy from Vox Machina started as a revenge arc. Cool, yeah, I've not really watched much of that campaign, so... I think they have enough people at that table, too, that I'm pretty sure they would have figured out a broad range of character motivations when they were putting together their people. Any idea to add content that piques personal interest from the players, for example, an amusement park setting, because Scar loves Disney? I will consider doing stuff like that if we have a longer campaign. I feel like the amusement park thing is maybe a little on the nose. It really depends what the players want. Like, I think at this point the players really like the concept of it staying focused in the traditional high fantasy kind of setting, but if there's the opportunity to bring in some elements that resonate with their interests where I can, then sure. But I'm going to do that in collaboration with them rather than just kind of dropping in some sort of reference and being like, yeah, you like that? Because while obviously, like, I'm a big fan of Hermits and I do the recap and everything, and I know a little bit about their interests that they've spoken about more generally, I don't want it to feel like I'm, for want of a better term, pandering, you know? I also don't want it to feel like I'm just a fan making some kind of campaign that's like, look at all the references I can make to the things that you like. It's not always just like, what is the player interested in? Is like, would the player's character be interested in this stuff as well? Acestus is the close combat hand-wrapping knifey things. Yeah, I mean, it's really just like a set of gloves, I think, this one. The knifey one is the spiked cestus, which is a separate weapon, I guess. So Hollow Knight wasn't my game. I liked a lot of the stuff about it. I just got to the point where I felt like the game should have been giving me more direction, and whether I was just too impatient to find that direction, or I was missing, like, the right hidden wall or something like that. It just felt like the game wasn't encouraging me to find that stuff anymore. And I just didn't feel like bopping around the environment forever trying to find what it was I missed, and I also didn't want to look up a guide because it really doesn't feel like you should have to do that in order to see that kind of part of a game. So, yeah, I let it be. Oh my goodness, Pyroscythe, welcome in! Oh my gosh, that's a huge raid. Thank you so much for dropping everyone by. Hope you're all doing well. My name is Pixelriffs. I am currently digging out a massive area of the Minecraft Survival Guide world so I can build a big copper aging machine. Welcome in, everyone. Hope you had a great stream. What was Pyro up to today? Tell me everything. We are also discussing the fact that I am running Dungeons & Dragons for a really great group of people at the end of this month, and so the announcement for that came out yesterday, so we've been having a good old chat. Love the Survival Guide world, so iconic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much once again for the raid. If you've got a raid and run, I completely understand. If you need to go and take care of yourself, that's fine. In the meantime, yes, hello, welcome. We are on Y6 of this latest section of the dig. Right now, we have 6 layers left to go. We're cutting the entire thing down to 0 in this massive area. And we're going to be building a machine that allows us to age copper as fast as possible, hopefully. Because it is still the Copper Age, even though they are now bringing out really cool... Like, we haven't even talked about the Minecraft update, the Snapshot that came out the other day. The one with all the really cute animal babies in it. Because I've been so distracted by the D&D thing that, yeah, I forgot that there was a Snapshot yesterday. Talked about that a little bit too. Yeah, what are your thoughts? Because I think... it's a really fun idea. I do wonder, with them having made name tags craftable, if they are also working on a name tag Easter egg where you can halt a young mob's growth so that they never become an adult mob and you get to hang out with the baby mob for longer. It would seem kind of strange if they didn't do that, considering that there has been call for it recently. Like, I know they implemented a data pack for it on Hermitcraft this season, so... if previous evidence is to be believed. It feels like Hermitcraft is the oracle of upcoming Minecraft updates, right? The little chicks are so cute. Yeah, I think the chicks are probably one of the more successful redesigns. I've heard some people are, like, mixed on the rabbit. Curious to see what they do with the villager name tag trade. I think, honestly, it'll probably stay there. Even though the new name tag crafting recipe is ludicrously cheap, I don't think they have a better thing to give librarians. The rabbits are your favorite remodel? Oh, cool. I'm glad that they've got some fans out there in the community, then. Rabbit feels slightly too big for me. I like them being a bit more slippery and small, yeah. I think that's what I've seen is, like, the model is, like, slightly too large, and people think the animation seems a little bit too polished or detailed or whatever. Someone shared a picture of the rabbit with the eyes on the side. It looks really cute. Remember when we all had the big debate about the armadillo? About how it should have had eyes on the side or the front, and then it... I don't know. It got changed up a couple of times. The chick might be my favorite. The rabbit might be my second favorite. I love them all, though. I'm a big fan of the Highland cow. Like the cold biome cow being a thing. So the baby one of that is always going to get my vote. I think they should give rabbits reduced fall damage. Yeah, I do agree. And not just because my rabbit on Minecraft SOS died. The kitten sounds are unreal. I think it's neat that they've also gotten pretty regular with the art team completely overhauling stuff lately. Like, I think it's cool that they're focused on updating legacy features of the game. Like, if they've got the opportunity to change up, like, potion sprites and stuff like that with some of these new gameplay drops as well, I think that's a long overdue change, which they've talked about doing in the past. I think they've just had difficulty making sure it's going to work well for the accessibility concerns. There are different sizes of rabbits in the real world, so maybe they should make the rabbit different for the biome that it's in. That's a possibility, I suppose, yeah. Have one of those rabbits with, like, the Angora. Is it Angora? Where they've got, like, really fluffy kind of hair. What new blocks would I like to see in a future update? My personal request is that they make something that's a building block with more of a royal blue kind of color. I think that's something we're really missing right now. Like, a lot of fantasy buildings have blue tile roofs, even when it comes to stuff like Lego sets, but there's a lot of that kind of fantasy concept art. Like, you think about the OG Warcraft games, how a lot of the time the humans were blue and the orcs were red, and the humans' houses all had those, like, blue roofs. By default, anyway. Yeah, very Stormwind blue. Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. Yeah, I feel like that's what we're missing from the build palette, you know? Your mileage may vary, of course, but I would love that. The lapis blue is marvelous. It being tileable is not the best, though. Yeah, exactly. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what it is. I sneeze once and my nose just doesn't turn off. 29 diamonds so far. Not bad. Not bad. Anyway, I think we're probably going to have to wrap up the stream here, but if you've just joined us and you're interested in watching something else, typically what I do these days is I do a stream double bill, where after we're done with streaming Minecraft, I come back and play a different game. We've been playing Elden Ring a bunch lately, getting back into a challenge I set myself ages ago where I'm trying to beat Elden Ring with every weapon in alphabetical order. We can still talk about D&D stuff, because that's obviously the latest big news as far as I'm concerned, but it seems like most people know what the deal is at this point, so I'm probably going to wrap up the stream here, and then come back in about 10 minutes or so, make another cup of tea, excuse me, and we will play some Elden Ring. We're going to be finishing up the last run that I got rudely interrupted by a power cut on Tuesday, and we should be able to finish up that run and maybe start another one. Until then, folks, have yourselves a good one. Take care. I'll catch you all for Elden Ring if you're sticking around. Bye for now.